hello to you both. What a pleasure to be able to spend time with you today. I understand that we are celebrating a 10th anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 10 years working with Nationwide. It's aged me, as you can see. Rob less so.
Yeah, I'm the Benjamin Button in the relationship there. Getting younger as you get older, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. We've got that role reversal to begin with. But yeah, 10 years of property risk
And partnership.
and partnership. Yeah.
We're even finishing each other's sentences now, aren't we? Yeah.
That really is a strong partnership. And
Indeed.
I'm really keen to get straight into it because there are loads of conversations at the moment about modern property risk and triage, and yet you, Rob, were leading this thinking when it wasn't the norm over a decade ago. And I'm really curious to understand what was it that helped Nationwide spot the opportunity to take a more integrated and really innovative approach to property risk, which was far ahead the rest of the market?
Well, it's an interesting question. I suppose it really kind of comes back from my background and experiences. So, having worked in the lending industry, also in the legal sector, and in the valuation space, I guess I had a sort of slightly unique view of how all of the transactions worked. So Michael will remember, say, probably about 12 years ago, I drew this triangle on a board showing a lender, a conveyancer, and a valuer, and saying, well, there's a gap here with all of their processes. So effectively, it's sort of sometimes the wrong party with the wrong data at the wrong time working in a silo. And that means that the home buying and selling process has flaws in how it works. It can create risk. And there were things I thought we should try and address by linking them together and understanding how we work in more sort of more synergies as opposed to kind of silos when it came to those parties. So that was the vision. And I suppose the last 10 years have been how we turn that vision into reality and how we've evolved it as the world has evolved.
Thank you. And really interesting to get sort of the background of the problems that you'd identified and actually starting to think about how we can solve them. So, Michael, if I can come to you, property risk inspection have played a really critical role in the work that Rob's describing. How is it that PRI helped to support and shape some of that thinking as it developed?
Yeah. I mean, our base was always in insurance triage for first notification of loss on property claims. So we were probably already in that mindset that having information up front helps.
Mm.
And when Rob approached us and we started to look at the nature of the problem, how could you use the data that existed and a workforce which was not what you would call a classically trained chartered professional, but a technician surveyor, and then collect data which would be useful and valuable for a desktop team that Rob envisaged he would build in his risk team. So we really saw our role as guardians of accurate quality data in the field at the property level,
Mhm.
photography. An awful lot of what was going wrong was because you couldn't see, you couldn't look at what it was. That was the subject address. So we built a program with Rob of photographic survey, data capture, and floor plan capture. And Rob then was going to turn that into a desktop triage with other data to be able to make a more sensitive decision, a more nuanced decision. And of course, hopefully, with more data and more accuracy, quicker, better outcomes for the consumer, for the conveyancer, for the lender. And so we saw our role really as being that front of house in the field, gathering the information to allow Rob's team to do their work.
And so I guess a follow on, thank you so much, Michael. A follow on question from that, Rob, for yourself. From your perspective, what have been the most meaningful outcomes of that work? And I guess from both those perspectives, for the lender, but also for Nationwide members as well.
I mean, it's twofold. Obviously, we live in a world where automation is kind of a key word and people want things faster. So the use of data in the journey has to be something that we can do sensibly. So we can triage through and allow them the cases where there is no problem to move really quickly, and the ones that need more attention to be reviewed by the appropriately qualified people. And this is kind of what working with Mike's teams allowed us to do, is to collect that data and be able to quickly triage how complicated a case is and who needs to look at it, which means from a lending perspective, we're making the right decisions, and ultimately it's about responsible lending and ensuring that we're helping the customer. But from that customer side, it's about ensuring that they get a journey that is sped up where we possibly can to ultimately allow them to move into the property that they want to live in.
Mm. So many benefits there, and so many sort of questions that come to mind as well. I guess if I can come back to you, Michael, which is the work and everything that you're doing with Nationwide, it is clearly very much a collaboration and a real sort of unique opportunity as well. What is it that helps you to continue to adapt and rethink your approach to ensure you continue with those meaningful outcomes and you're moving forward rather than standing still?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is Rob has always tried to inform what his challenges and problems are. And these things are so dynamic. An example, that there has been a move towards energy efficiency within properties, and the government have granted various schemes such as spray foam insulation. And then we find that spray foam insulation is damaging properties and maintaining a moisture balance in timbers that could be disruptive and mean that the property is less valuable or at risk. We constantly have to respond to what's happening in the real world with property, with cladding, with energy, with insulation, with all of these factors. And Rob really allows us to understand those issues from his perspective, from a lender's perspective, to provide good loans and not to take on properties at risk, not to take on properties that are only going to be an issue for a purchaser and put them in a difficult situation. So it's the openness and transparency of our partnership and relationship that really drives the service dynamic.
Mm-hmm. So I guess then a really important question is to Rob, but also to you both. You've changed how property risk is thought about and applied, and you're seeing that value of that shift. What's next in the cycle of innovation?
Well, from my perspective, I started out talking about the lender, the value of the conveyancer. We still haven't completely nailed the transfer of data and knowledge all the way through the chain. So I think we've got very good at linking in with the valuation element of it and using that data, which helps us get to mortgage offer very quickly. I think the bit we need to work on now is how we use that data in a more appropriate way to help the conveyancing process speed up, because as you'll read in the news, it takes longer and longer to actually for people to move into houses. So we need to make sure that data is flowing through to avoid any bottlenecks at the back end of the process. So it's about, again, linking all of the professionals who are working on a transaction together and ensuring that they've got the right data to help them complete the tasks they need to do when working through the legal element of the process. So for me, that's probably the next big focus of how we kind of transition through the whole end-to-end journey.
Mm. And Michael, what's on the horizon for PRI as this continues to evolve?
Yeah, it's absolutely clear that to be able to support people in the field, you need high quality data, but you also need to know that that data is a universal key, i.e., that there isn't another data set being used by another party, which contradicts the very data set that you're utilizing. So I think the normalization for me of what we might term open property, because we've had for many years now an open banking, credit banking situation where the benefits are obvious to a consumer, that they are offered services and products that are fit for them. For me and my work with Rob is to try and support him in producing a true United Kingdom open property file that truly reflected the risks inherent in an address and allowed the consumer the certainty that this was the right property for them. So I would absolutely love to see that convergence of data into that single point of truth. And I know that's Rob's absolute end mission, is to have that single point of truth drive the decisioning all the way through the chain. Outcomes for the consumers inevitably then become good outcomes.
Yeah, I think we've always described it. If you're thinking of it as the end goal, you would want every property in the UK to sort of like be a coat hook, and you just hang the data on it so it's easily available, and ensuring that there's that provenance of the data, so you know where it's come from, can you rely on it, and it definitely is in relation to the property. So, I mean, one of the big challenges we always have, and we've been working on for years, and we've kind of improved significantly, is even just people knowing what the address is of a property and having different addresses. So that's the key to it all, starting out by being able to pin down the address and then build out the data around it, which is the journey we're on.
And you know, the Rob is absolutely right here. If we can get those things right, then that direction of travel for the consumer, for the British public, is a good direction of travel, and it's a positive experience for them. All of the stress that we see in the house buying and selling process is around the idea that data can control or slow down a sale. Rob's really driving to say, how do we get out of the way? How do we get out of the way in property risk to allow people to quickly move house, to quickly acquire that new home for them and their family?
Whilst also understanding what the risks are, because again, one of the key problems you find in the current process, or the process that we have had over the last 20 years, is a lot of times customers only find out about problems right at the last minute. And by then they are emotionally and financially committed, and it means that they may have not made that decision if they'd had the information at the beginning of the process. So the more we can bring up front to allow consumers to make educated decisions about the properties they want to buy, that will have better results and should speed up the process.
I could listen to this in the fact that I think there's so many benefits from, as you say, the lender perspective, from an industry wide, but ultimately the consumer, the customer, you and I buying houses day to day as well. Just my final question then, just to, and again, to either of you there, how are you going to continue to communicate as well as shaping the customer experience? What have been some of the blockers that might be getting in the way, and how do we overcome that with how we communicate about building well for the future?
I think connectivity. I think the difficulty that we have in trying to create that open property agenda is that many of the systems are legacy. Many of the processes are legacy processes. In a way, there isn't the true paradigm shift where we all accept that this address can be properly triaged at the very beginning. So we've got a hearts and minds problem, and we've got a literal connectivity and systems problem. And the two of them tend to compound each other. So that there is this fog around an address, which is a fog of poor systems and systemization. And there is a fog around this address because the individuals, the hearts and minds, haven't really understood what we're trying to achieve. Do you know, Emma, I know in all my work, I had no idea of the complexities of a lender's position, of nationwide problems related to lending, of an address as an individual address, as an address as a part of a portfolio, as a family of addresses that they have to consider, of the difference between a rental address and a home that's not for rental use. It is so complicated and so difficult for those not on the inside to understand that language. And I know that Rob's mission has been to try and get that language and that message out there of what their challenges are in giving people good homes with loans.
Absolutely. And I think so important around that connectivity. Rob.
Yeah, I'll just sort of just add to that. I can't disagree with anything that Michael's just said. From my perspective, I don't think there's going to be a big bang moment in this industry. It's chipping away at the issues one by one, because that's the nature of the number of parties involved. What I would say is that, for example, if you were to consider some of the challenges that there were 10, 15 years ago, the technology is now in place. Building APIs, transferring data, it's all quite doable and it's not prohibitively expensive. There are legacy systems that people need to get over, but people are replacing technology. I think the key thing is, as people are replacing technology, it's making sure that we're building out systems that talk to each other, and meaning that we can transfer that data, and that end-to-end point helps. And I think, again, it then allows us to remove duplication. So you speak to people in the process and they go, I had to provide the same document to 5 different people. That's the sort of stuff we need to remove, because you shouldn't have to provide your ID to an estate agent, a lender, a valuer, a conveyancer, etc., etc. That should be able to go through. So there's some easier areas where we can kind of knock down some doors and make it straightforward. There's some other things which are going to be more challenging. There's still some data that isn't digital, and there's projects going on which are starting to have big impacts. A good example being the government and the land registry digitalising local land charges, things like that. And they're starting to come to fruition where that data is now going to be readily available, and they will remove blockers from the process and speed things up. So it's ensuring that we all consume that data and use it for our decisioning in a sensible way. So it's a very exciting time now, because we're starting to really kind of see lots of building blocks that we've had over the last decade turn from foundations to actual real life things that we can deal with and move forward. So yeah, I'm really excited that the next 5 years is we're going to start to see some real significant change in this space, because everyone's kind of trying to move in the same direction, which helps.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to follow and continue to see the innovation and ideas that are coming from Nationwide. And again, great to see PRI critically sort of supporting and developing those ideas as well. Thank you both so much for sharing, but also explaining it in a way that we can understand it impacts us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.